Hello, I'm Christy Canterbury, Master of Wine. Thank you for joining me for this video presentation of my article for Wineauctionprices.com on optimizing your wine drinking experience with a focus on wine service temperature and wine aeration. We spend a lot of effort sourcing the right wine for the right occasion and for specific food pairings, yet when we pull the cork, we often overlook two basic but important elements of the wine drinking experience: service temperature and aeration. These two factors can considerably improve any wine drinking occasion, even the most casual. The easiest of the pair to control is wine service temperature. Moreover, wine temperature can even be measured with an instant read thermometer, like the one you probably already have in a kitchen drawer. Aeration, or better yet, oxygenation, I'll get into those specifics later, is not as straightforward, especially if you don't have a dissolved oxygen meter. That's a prop I'm missing, but that's okay. Not even the most lauded sommeliers carry those around. You don't have to use instruments and get technical to potentially vastly improve your wine tasting or even better wine drinking experiences. Let's take a look at the roles that temperature and oxygen perform in wine enjoyment and how you can implement simple steps to optimize your wine drinking occasions. Part 1, wine service temperature. Serving wine at the proper temperature brings out the best aromas and flavors. The right temperature also optimizes the wine's structural components. Ideally, flavor, tannin, acidity, and alcohol should perform their parts harmoniously and work together. Wine served too cold or too warm will under or overemphasize one or more of these characters and make for a less agreeable experience, even if it isn't bad. Granted, personal preference plays a part, and that's fine. However, if the winemaker would serve his or her wine differently, and she or he would definitely pay attention to wine service temperature and aeration, then it's worth at least one try. You can always revert back. There's no one-size-fits-all solution to wine service temperatures. After all, a red isn't just a red. There are light, medium, and heavy reds. Some reds are unoaked, some have neutral oak. Some taste like they could be advertising tours in the forests of France, where the most prestigious oak for wine barrels grows. Some reds are fiercely tannic, and others are silky smooth. They're old and young reds. Some reds are close to the screw cap, and others with corks meant to last decades. That's right, even closures can make a difference in how a wine tastes right out of the bottle. Today's white wines are generally well chilled, even over chilled, and red wines are served at room temperature. While white wines can benefit from warming up in the glass, red wine served at room temperature will not. This is primarily because today's room temperature is already far too warm for most reds. Besides, room temperature varies wildly. Is the room temperature in your dining room the same in winter as in summer? What happens when you take a room temperature red outside for summer dinner on the patio? It likely heats up to above room temperature depending on where you live. The idea of room temperature is incredibly dated. It is unbelievable that this tip has perpetrated wine advice for so long, because room temperature in this context refers to temperatures in the rooms of chilly European castles. We're not living in those these days. Today, we call this temperature range of approximately 55 to 60 degrees cellar temperature. It's a temperature at which you would ideally store your wines. If you keep your thermostat at an energy-efficient summer temperature of 78 degrees Fahrenheit, your wine could be as much as 20 degrees Fahrenheit higher than its ideal serving temperature. Refer to the article online for temperature range suggestions for 11 different wine styles. A worthwhile exercise is to trial several different wine styles at 2 or even 3 different temperatures. For example, pour a glass of chilled white and allow it to sit at room temperature for 20 minutes. Then pour another glass fresh from the fridge and taste them side by side. Which is better? It might depend on the age of the wine or the grape variety. It might also depend on whether the wine has new oak or not. Notice not only the aromas and the flavor in each glass, but also notice the differences, if any, in the refreshment provided by the two glasses. Do the same for a red. Pour a glass and place it in the refrigerator for 20 minutes. Then compare it to one poured at that infamous room temperature. For the red, pay particular attention to the feel of the tannin, which is what creates a drying effect on the palate, whether on the gums or on the tongue. Also note whether the fruit flavors seem fresher in one glass or the other. A basic summary of the temperature effects on wine. Excessively cold temperatures tamp down flavors and aromas. They also emphasize the combination of tannins and acids in red and orange wines, and some rosés, which can create unpleasant bitterness. Cool temperature, a la cellar temperature, or about 55 degrees, tend to bring out the best aromas and flavors. They also allow the wine structure to harmonize. Warm temperatures often make wines taste flabby and mushy, especially reds. Warm temperatures also emphasize higher alcohols, sometimes even making the wine taste spirity. Warmer temperatures also emphasize lavish new oak use. It's harder to taste the fruit. How do you arrive at the ideal wine serving temperature ranges? First, check your refrigerator temperature setting. Use that kitchen thermometer. If you don't have a digital display, just leave it on the shelf for a few minutes. You might be surprised by just how cold your refrigerator is. Sparkling wines are pretty easy. Serve them cold. Of course, there are nuances even within this category. Different sparkling wines show best at different temperatures. Tank fermented or Charmat or Martinotti method sparklers, Prosecco is a classic example, benefit from the coolest temperatures. That emphasizes their highly fragrant, youthful, often pretty aromas. Bottle fermented or classic method bubblies, like champagne, don't need to be as cold. While they may be as robust in aromas, they also have more texture from the wine's production, which requires lees aging with the wine. That texture is better showcased at slightly warmer temperatures. White wines follow similar principles with regard to more aromatic wines, as well as lighter white wine styles made without new oak use. Wines fermented and aged in some portion of new oak should be served warmer. The same goes for older white wines, even if they're aromatic. For example, a Riesling that's young would benefit from a cooler temperature than one that's a decade old. Rosé wines generally can be served based on their colors. Paler wines work better at cooler temperatures, and more deeply colored rosés work better at slightly warmer temperatures. The darkest rosés, which can even look like light reds, should be served at warmer temperatures, more like a light red wine. Orange wines, which are white wines that have been made with substantial grape skin contact to impart more flavor and some tannin, should generally be served at the temperature of a mature white or a light red wine temperature, mostly because of those tannins. As with rosés, the lighter the orange hue, the cooler the temperature usually can be, and vice versa. In restaurants and wine bars, even in New York City, I frequently find that orange wines are served way too cool. It's almost as if the sommelier thinks that they're white wines. They're called orange for a reason. When it comes to reds, one trend must be clarified. In the last few years, many restaurants and retailers have been promoting this idea of chillable reds. The tricky thing, and now you know already, is that many of these reds were being served at a temperature that was much too high. Were this antiquated idea of room temperature red wine service not pervasive, there would be less novelty in this idea of a chillable red. However, it is true that some lighter bodied and lower tannin reds can be chilled even a few degrees cooler than would usually be served to a very pleasant effect. This aside, fresh, unoaked, and light-bodied, fragrant reds benefit from the coolest temperatures. The further up the scale one goes in tannin, body, and new oak, the warmer the temper should be. With mature whites, And mature reds. They should be served at slightly warmer temperatures too, more or less the same as fuller-bodied and oaked reds. Sweet wine temperatures vary greatly based on the wine sweetness and their acidity levels. Generally, the principles for white wine can be followed here. And I've got a tip for you. If you find the wine in your glass is a bit too intense in sweetness, a slightly cooler temperature will help reduce that sweet intensity. Fortified wines differ based on their styles and sweetness levels. Generally, sherries, madeiras, marsalas, and white port follow the guidelines of mature white wines. The lighter the color of the wine and the lower the sweetness level, the cooler the fortified wine can be served. Port, Banyuls, Mallory, and Reef Salt follow the temperature principles of mature reds. That's a lot of information. So again, be sure to check out the article online for suggested temperature ranges for different wine styles. So, how to cool your wine bottle to the proper serving temperature. Between the space and the cost, a wine refrigerator, not to mention a customized wine cellar, may feel like a luxury. However, if you store your bottles in a reasonably cool environment, in a basement, a dark closet, or a room without an exterior wall, you can get them to their ideal service temperatures relatively quickly. Placing the bottle in the refrigerator or freezer is one of the simplest, most obvious ways, even if it's not the fastest. If you go the latter route, be sure to set a reminder so you don't forget the bottle in the freezer. I've done that, and it can get pretty ugly when a bottle pushes a cork out and spits a wine slushy all over your frozen vegetables. Rest assured that when a bottle warms up, it will do so much more quickly than when it chills down, especially once the wine has been poured into glasses. So don't be too concerned about over chilling, with the obvious exception of freezing the wine bottle. 20 minutes in a refrigerator won't do much more than chill the bottle's glass, but 20 minutes in the freezer may be all you need to have your wine ready to serve, depending on the wine style, of course. Here are some guidelines for the approximate amount of time it takes to chill wines, roughly based on color and major style. Your four main options are the refrigerator, the freezer, a wine chiller sleeve, or an ice bath with water and salt. Check the online article for guidelines by wine type and chilling source, but here's a quick summary. In the refrigerator, sparkling wines, 3.5 hours. Hope you've got time on your hands. White and rosé wines, 3 hours. Red and orange, 2 hours. Freezer, sparkling wines, 35 minutes. Already a drastic reduction in time required. White and rosé wines, 30 minutes. Red and orange, 20. Wine chiller sleeves for sparkling wines? Nope. These are fantastic, but they usually only last about 30 minutes. So you're better off using these for sparkling wines only to keep the wine cold, not to chill it. With these, white and rosé wines can be chilled in 30 minutes, about the lifespan of the chiller sleeve. Red and orange wines, about 20 minutes. Ice bath with water and salt. Sparkling wines, you're down to 25 minutes. White and rosé wines, 20 minutes. Red and orange wines, 10 minutes. Now, nota bene. If the wine bottle is taller than the chilling sleeve or the bucket, part of the wine won't be chilled, and that's going to be the first part that you drink. And while this comes up pretty high, lots of wine buckets aren't going to come up much more than about to maybe here or even here. So be sure to rock the bottle upside down a few times before you open the bottle to mix the chilled and warmer liquid. Be careful doing this with sparkling wine, as the cork may push out of the bottle more quickly once the wire cage has been removed, as you've been shaking up all those bubbles. This wraps up the temperature portion. Let's move on to aeration and oxygenation in part 2. What is aeration and why is it talked about so often with wine? While we're at it, let's consider, along with aeration, terms like breathe, open up, exposure. All of these terms nod to the fact that wine is a reactive product. The general concept is that wine becomes reactive when it is exposed to air or aerated. What wine really reacts to, however, is the oxygen in the air. Alas, oxygen comprises only 21% of the air we breathe. So that we talk about aeration, what we really want is oxygenation. Like with most things, oxygen can be good or bad. It's all about how much and how long the wine is exposed to oxygen. Which wines should breathe? Almost any wine. Red, rosé, orange, white benefits from oxygenation and aeration. In fact, sometimes wine gets better after it's been open for a good while, even a few days. In fact, in my experience, a wine is better the day after it was opened, about 20% of the time. Another, maybe 5% of the time, it's better the second day after opening. So if you don't like a bottle when you first open it, it's worth keeping it around for a few days. I've even kept them around for a few weeks and seen that they've improved. Just watch how it evolves. After all, wine is a living product. It breathes just like we do. Granted, if a wine is exposed to too much oxygen for too long, it will turn bad. This isn't like spoiled milk. It won't be harmful. It just turns to vinegar. It's better for your salad dressing. And that can happen to a wine at any age. Very old wines, say 20, 30 plus year old wines, deserve extra attention as they can be hypersensitive to oxygen. While it can be beneficial to decant these older wines to separate the liquid from the sediment, the aeration can wreak havoc on the tasting experience. When I decant an old wine, I decant it into a vessel like this one that doesn't allow too much air, oxygen, to wine contact. It's a pretty small ratio there. Speaking of decanting, how can you help wines breathe? This brings us to accelerating aeration or oxygenation. The act of aerating means increasing that wine to air surface ratio. Simply popping a cork and letting a wine sit in the bottle does nothing. It's only about a half an inch of a surface in between the two sides of the opening of the bottle. And only 21% is being exposed to oxygen. It's not aerating in a bottle. So the best way to aerate is to decant it into a wine decanter with a wider base or pitcher. Yes, a plain pitcher is fine. But this, you can see, is a much wider exposure level. Much more wine surface to air ratio, a much higher air to surface ratio there. Also, simply pouring the wine into a larger wine glass can really help. And in fact, if you take a look at these, you can kind of see here that the widest part of the bowl is about as wide as the top of the decanter. So not as helpful as our very big flat decanter, but it's still doing some good. How long should a wine be aerated? Generally speaking, the bolder the wine is in flavor, drying tannins, alcohol, the more it will benefit from a longer aeration period. Again, this is assuming the wine is not exceptionally old. If you're often short on time or just impatient, it's worth investing in a device called the Wine Pro 2, which directly oxygenates the wine. This is different from an aerator, which tries to increase the quantity of air incorporated into the glass of wine. I have trialed dozens of those. They are absolutely positively not worth your money. They may change a wine, but in almost every case, the wine reverts to the way it's poured out of the bottle immediately. Some of them last 2-3 minutes, but it really doesn't change the wine much. So I'm going to pour myself some wine here. I'm going to show you the Wine Pro 2. I love this thing. The Wine Pro 2 can oxygenate wine in the bottle, in the decanter, or directly in the glass. And that's a nice option because everyone might want their wine slightly more or less aerated. And the device with this little lever dispenses 100% oxygen into the glass. Don't worry, we didn't just make bubbly. And this immediately does hours of aerating in decanters. Remember, too much oxygen is not a good thing, so follow the Wine Pro 2 suggestion, oxygenate minimally. You can oxygenate more if you go little by little, but once it's gone, you can't take it back. And with a little stir, you can see, a little swirling, you can see those bubbles are going away. Save that for later. So, to regulate temperature and to aerate or oxygenate, that has been our question. Hopefully this guide has served to convince you that wine service temperature and wine aeration or oxygenation are worth pursuing for almost any and all wines in order to maximize your wine drinking experiences. Neither have to take up too much time or be expensive. If these factors haven't been a focus for you before, with a little experimentation, your wines will soon taste better than ever. Thank you for watching this video for Wineauctionprices.com, and do check out the details on service temperatures and wine chilling times in the online article. Cheers.